was, what was the purpose of Martin Luther and John Charles Wesley receiving light on justification and sanctification if there was a justified and sanctified church throughout the gospel day with victory and power? Why did God need them to bring the message to those in Catholicism and Protestantism? So the thought is, God, if there was a glorious, visible body with all the light and truth of the morning time, and if you're not following that, that's what the controversy really was. Although I'll show some discrepancies there in just a moment. So another question: did those around 1880 coming out of Babylon come to an existing body of people who had all the light? And we know they didn't. I can show you in the Birth of a Reformation how there was only two congregations known in that time that came out fully, took their stand for the truth and started their camp meetings, as we know the Church of God. If the full light existed with some, why didn't God use them to bring people out of apostasy and Babylon? Why did light have to be restored using a Catholic priest and Methodist ministers? And then here's some of the inconsistencies. In a message, God's Church Restored by G.W. Powell, 1975, he said for 350 years, from about the time of Martin Luther, God moved on men's hearts. A number of years before that, the saints, their hearts were lifting, and I'm reading quotes from the message, their hearts were lifting up to God, dear ones. They wanted delivered out of confusion. Thank God, God brought it to pass. So, and then he went on to say, and later on, the Wesley brothers, the teaching of holiness. In another excerpt, he said, so we find that those 350 years God used to bring people to knowledge and full understanding of the Word of God. Later, he said, now that truth was lost for 1,260 years or more in Christendom, so-called, in a message called Doctrine. G.W. Powell, 1985, he said the truth as we know it was practically lost. Well, was it completely lost to everybody? But the church, that remnant, which was the church with the woman of their symbol, he had to correct his statement. And I'm reading, but this is not what he taught in 1975. So we can see that there was so much inconsistencies and really both sides almost saying the same thing and splitting hairs really over where the church was. And in my opinion, it was a lack of some understanding concerning the revelation. And I can read, I have many, many, many things that I won't even have time to go over tonight that I could go and validate further positions on that.
Brother Mills, we'll take a quick break. We'll come right back, friends, again. This is a discussion of the year. What happened in those days of the 80s, the split that is still active today. And we're talking about what happened, what we can learn from it, not make those same mistakes. We'll be back with Brother Mullins, One in the Wilderness, in just a moment. Don't leave.
Greetings. Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches is a weekly podcast reaching out to the disenfranchised, disconnected, or wounded. Remember, you are not forgotten. You went through a debilitating situation. As a result, we are reaching out to you in love with forgiveness, reconciliation, and healing. We also offer an exciting magazine called Arise. It's an excellent fit for class discussions or personal devotions. Arise can be purchased through our website or by calling 478-784-7600. This podcast was designed by Church of God for Church of God. Don't go away. Stay tuned for more exciting conversations. Thanks for listening.
Glad you're back. We're talking about Woman in the Wilderness and that split that occurred. It split families, it split friendships, churches, on and on and on, even to this day. We're just taking a look at it to learn from it. But it was cataclysmic. It really was. I mean, so we're discussing these things to find out what went on and how we can do better in this. Brother Mullins, continue, please, if you would.
Okay, so before I jump over to any ministerial letters, which I have a number. But all those things being said, and of course we understand the accusation was they destroyed the church. Okay, there's a young man had written a book. It's called The History of the Church of God from 1880 through 2005. And it's a young man from West Virginia that had written this book. And he was telling of difference. Very good book. Very, very good book. It gets a lot of history. But I find one discrepancy, the same charge that was listed here in on page 112 of this book, and it reads like this. It says it's called The Wilderness Teaching. And he's parroting what he'd heard. Okay. Around 1985, division again rocked the church because I'm reading this, so I'm not being disrespectful when I read the names. I'm just reading it as it is. Around 1985, division again rocked the church because of Dwayne Spinogle of Morgan City, Alabama. Spinogle was a powerful preacher who consistently preached on revelation and pastoral authority. Spinogle. Now this is erroneous. Okay, it's very erroneous. It's not accurate, and I'll prove it to you in just a moment. Spinogle taught the teaching. This is what he's saying. This is what he wrote in his book, and they need to add a disclaimer and correct this. Spinogle taught the teaching that the pure woman of Revelation, the 12th chapter, the church, the bride of Christ, became the harlot woman of Revelation, the 17th chapter. He changed the meaning of the symbol itself, which is absolutely inaccurate, and taught that the church was destroyed, meaning that at one point in history, the true church ceased on earth. Some now teach the woman in Revelation 12th chapter was the Roman Catholic Church of God. Spinogle refused to submit to the brethren, and division occurred. During this division, great men such as Spinogle and, of course, Griffin left the body. An estimated 10 or more congregations followed, including Knoxville, Tennessee, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Forest City, Arkansas, New Smyrna Beach, Florida, Burn Station, Oklahoma, and many others. The publication for the wilderness churches is The Ambassador. Over the next 20 years, other congregations have left the main body. Now, what is the main body? It would be my question. The most visible area of compromise. And keep in mind, this is a group that also teaches they are exclusively the church alone. Okay. That's why they're using terms like the main body. Over the next 20 years, other congregations have left the main body. The most visible area of compromise has been the dress standards, the hair standard, the standard against television and the movies, the standard of divine healing, and the standard of tithing. So, again, that's I'm going to read something to prove to you that that's absolutely inaccurate, and it was a wrong charge. So I have a couple of I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from messages from August 25th, 1985. This is called The Church and the Apostasy by Dwayne Spinogle. Again, keep in mind, there's other charges in other letters and messages that made statements like, don't make my mother a harlot. Okay? Mm-hmm. And again, they were charging Brother Spinogle as destroying the church. And not willing to reason and listen and hear people out. But I'm going to read this. He says, we see a picture here of the church. This is Brother Spinogle, 1985, in a message. We see a picture here of the church as it continued. And keep in mind, as it continued, there was generation after generation. James, Peter, Paul, and John, they stayed true, but they died off. Another generation came, another, and another. This portion that apostatized, the church, when it apostatized, that's not my spiritual mother. My spiritual mother are those who started this and stayed true, and that remnant that stayed true down through here. That's my spiritual mother. These that apostatized and gave over to this and cooperated with this, they are not my spiritual mother. So these are some of the things that I begin to find in the research. And if you don't have any questions, I have some
No,
more
I do.
things
I
to
do.
tell about that. Okay,
Well,
go ahead.
Brother Mullins, I'm a black and white guy. I'm pretty simplistic. Uh,
Mhm.
so one of the issues here is a difference in one of the symbols to a couple of, was it a symbolic split over some of the symbols?
Yes. Mhm.
Wow. Wow. And
Yes.
so
And
because we, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
so to explain that, when we see Revelation, the 12th chapter, and it talks about the woman with the moon under her feet, clothed with the sun. Okay, that's the church in her morning glory. Okay,
Mhm.
but we also, okay, so uh, it seemed like people could not see beyond that symbol. There's also symbols in Revelation, the 8th chapter, that spoke of the mountain that was on fire that was cast into the sea. That's also
Mhm.
that was a representation of the church, or the apostasy coming into the church. Uh, we see the horses. We see her going forth on a white horse. Then we see the red horse coming and opposing the church. Then we see the black horse representing apostasy in our understanding. And then we see a pale horse representing just such a great decline. And then we see, fast forward all the way to 1880, we see a message to come out of her, my people. So there was things that was overstated, maybe not understood the way they needed to, but God said, "Come out of her, my people." Where did He call them out of? He called them out of Babylon. That wasn't just a handful of folks that was scattered here and there. It goes back to Ezekiel, the 34th chapter, where Christ, God said, "There, I will gather my people from all places where they have been scattered, both in the dark and the cloudy day." And so we just see all that coming to pass. And by all appearance, there was a rush to judgment, uh, really, of where the church existed down through the Dark Ages, which really
And
has no
so and
bearing
so
on us.
and so that rush to judgment based on a symbol, different ideas of it, was the tenor of that split.
That is correct.
Wow.
That is
You
correct.
also mentioned being inconsistent. Does division connect with being inconsistent sometime? Do those run together?
Well,
Inconsistency and
in
division?
this case, it certainly did, because the very things that they were charging on one hand, they were saying the opposite on the other hand. So you can't have it both ways. The
Right.
church could have been scattered and crying out, and God answering their prayer, and there being one glorious visible body down through the ages. Uh, and I remember having a discussion with my former pastor when I was dealing with all this. And my position was, if you feel like there was a glorious, visible, separate body known as the Church of God with all the light and truth down through the Dark Ages, that's up to you. I don't see that. I don't believe that. The old brethren didn't teach that. The Bible doesn't teach that. However, I'm not going to divide with you over that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not an acceptable position.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned also people did not want to reason and discuss things. Is that also a tenet of division? A lack of
Yes,
discussion and working things
yes,
out?
absolutely. And I have, at some point, I have ministerial letters even addressing those things that, and and people refuse to come back to the table. They refuse to give this thing any time, or try to consider. Uh, just drew a line in the sand, and that was it.
Friends, our time is gone again. We've been discussing this major split back in the 80s, one in the wilderness. We're talking about to find out what we can do better and to try to bring about some unity if at all possible. Some cases you can't do that. We want to at least reconcile much as we can until those coming on behind us can learn a bit better, to not rush to judgment. Uh, when it gets inconsistency, you need to put it on hold for a while because that can breed division. He also talked about the idea of not discussing things. So these are some tendencies that can cause division. If it's in the home, job, same situation works, but especially in God's church. So, Brother Mullins, thank you again for being here. To our director
Thank you.
and those who are listening, may the Lord bless you.
Amen.